Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel, and today we are going to be letting Sovietwomble show us the brutal realities of trying to play with his friends in ZF Clan. This is random Holdfast Nations BS, the only one, I think. Thank God. Let's get into it.
Crews have moved closer by necessity. They don't have the range of the cannons, so pretty much an equal number of soldiers on either side. So all of the redcoats are falling back to our own camp for artillery protection. Right, how many cannons do we have? We have 2 and we have a mortar piece.
So, okay, I want to point this out. This is actually a really interesting point that Soviets kind of trying to make in a roundabout way. And that is that tactics are a reflection of the times, right? Because while we sometimes look at, say, World War I or the colonial war, colonial era wars, the 1700s, and we say, wow, those tactics were so crude, they were so inept. But with the technology available at the time and the not just military technology, but technologies for communication, technologies for maneuver, for issuing and receiving orders. All of those things, even logistics technology, how good were the roads? How good were the transport methods? How reliable was it to be able to get goods and people from one place to another? Right? Given all those constraints, the conflict nature of warfare and the political environment that it took place in is going to be reflected in combat. Now, that doesn't mean that every tactic used throughout history is always the most effective, but it's usually the best one available given the constraints. A great example is in the late medieval period, right? So probably maybe 100 to 200 years before this sort of Napoleonic warfare took place, you had professional soldiery that would often be hired out to engage in battles, but there would be very little actual decisive warfare, right? You wouldn't try to exterminate the other side entirely or destroy their ability to wage war. And that was a function of two things. One, mercenaries only got paid if they survived, so both sides didn't really have much of an incentive to go all hard in the paint, so to speak. But second, as your benefactor usually was paying this army on the basis of compensating for losses, which meant that putting all of your troops in, i.e. betting big on, say, one hand, one battle, was not very smart financial decisions. So even though tactically there would be probably better tools to try to engage in a decisive battle, politically the tactic that made sense was a looser, less decisive engagement style. So when we look at tactics like this Napoleonic era stuff, it seems silly. You think, why weren't the uniforms camouflaged? Well, in part because you can see they don't have smokeless powder. The battlefields very quickly fill with smoke and smog. And for commanders to be able to see the battlefield, to understand what's happening, the only communication, the only way to do that effectively is to literally look out across a hillside or across a field and see their troops arrayed before them. And the only way to ensure you could do that on a smog and smoke-covered battlefield was with giant bright-colored uniforms. So again, it seems crazy and preposterous to us in our era where there's so many better means of communicating to troops, but in that era it absolutely was the most sensible way to engage in warfare.
We have 1 and we have a mortar piece. We have a mortar piece. My mouse is really sticky and so is my keyboard because I spilled cider all over it.
Yes, cider.
Shut up.
Cider.
Shut up. French or British?
Yes.
Hey! Really? You got a flute?
Yeah, like I said.
Why didn't you bring a gun?
Forward, gentlemen, forward!
So here is something really interesting that doesn't really translate to an RTS strategy like this, right? Because in an RTS, of course, you can click and give orders. But the role of a fife player or drum player in combat was to, again, remember, if you can imagine a general can't see through the smog and smoke of burned powder, then there's no chance those individuals in a formation were going to see it as well. So they would rely on commands given to them not verbally, because oftentimes the human voice can't project very far and it's hard to hear, but high-pitched noises actually have tremendous projection. They're very easy to pick up across great distances. So the easiest way to communicate would often be to have a flute, fife, drum, or horn player, or not usually the drums would be to keep people in step, but would be a fife, flute, or horn player who would provide commands through the the amplification of their instrument. So you would have a certain command. For example, quarter turn left would be a certain set of notes on the flute that every soldier in that formation would recognize. In very, very formal military events, they will still do this. They will still have a trumpeter who will issue commands, who will ceremonially, the commander will say, sound, present arms. And then, even though the command present arms has been given, in these very formal events, a trumpeter will sound off something that sounds like burp, 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 and that's meant to be preparatory command of which you'd recognize as present. Burp is arms, and that final note is the command to render a salute. And so that's sort of a testament to this era of warfare, when commands would be issued via flute and directions given.
I'm reloading.
Move your ass.
Moving.
Wing the country.
So how do you aim down the sides?
Right, hold down right mouse button.
But it's not aiming down the sides. I just got a big circle.
Yeah, that's the sight.
That's it?
It's a musket.
I can't hit shit with this.
It's a musket.
It's a musket.
Are you just
Occupy
following us
the
around with a flute?
palisade.
Can you use a gun? That would be more useful right now.
Get your ass behind this bar.
Yeah, this is the other thing he's pointing out, is that a musket didn't have rifling in the barrel, which meant that you couldn't aim at any individual target. The only way to hit anything or to deal any decisive amount of damage was actually to mass fire. It's sort of like, imagine if a shotgun with one buckshot, with one BB coming out of your shotgun barrel, the chances of you hitting any target that you aimed at was basically zero. But if you have 8, 10, 12 BBs coming out of that shotgun, the fact that they individually don't have a precise, predictable trajectory is immaterial, because collectively you could be reasonably certain that they're going to hit something close to what you aimed at. So this formation is, again, a natural, logical way to ensure combat effectiveness given the technological limitations of the time.
Barricade and unleash that gunpowder into Napoleon's presence.
Sarge, I don't want to die here, Sarge. I don't want to die here.
You're not gonna die, sir. We are British. We do not die. Laugh in the fit. Oh shit.
Everyone get into character. This is a strict RP only server. Oh, thank you.
Is that the Sovietwomble?
Oh,
Oh, God.
Fix your upload schedule.
Okay, that's pretty funny. Also, he made a joke about shooting Napoleon's peasants. And this is because Napoleon, after the French Revolution, did something that was seen as pretty incredible at the time. And this was implemented a general conscription, right? This was the idea that instead of a professional army that was supported full-time by your crown or by your regent or by the state, that Napoleon raised an army of conscripts who he briefly trained, then quickly equipped with basic weaponry, and then marched into battle. And it allowed France to put several times as many men onto the battlefield as the British. Now, the quality, it left something to be desired, but Napoleon was able to basically take losses at scale that were considered unbelievable for the era. The idea of losing 5,000 men in a day was something that he would brag that he was willing to do with his troops. And in contrast, right, it's sort of preposterous to think about, because 150 years later, losses of 50,000 men in a day would be conceivable in wars like the First World War.
What the hell's wrong with you?
But when he talks about Napoleon's peasants, that's what he means. These were farmers they were fighting against, the British fighting against in the Napoleonic Wars. Farmers, peasants, clerks, shopkeepers,
Come on, this is the British Army, ladies and gentlemen. Come on, double time, let's go. The war will be over by the time we get there.
Benko, I love you.
I love you too, Mussolini. Never thought I'd say that.
Thank you. I once made love to a flamingo.
No man shall lie with another man in this army. Seaman, you disgusting perv. Put that away. Right, gentlemen, we are the bravest and most superior men on this battlefield. Listen to my sweet, posh, upper-class accent, and you can trust me when I say that I have this position merely because my father was rich, and I possess no real military qualities. Please entrust me with your survival.
Well, I'm sold.
Right, here we are looking at French.
So this is the other thing that we often talk about, is the idea that oftentimes officer positions in the militaries of this era were prestige positions that were bought and sold. This is, of course, a function of... excuse me while I caffeinate. I'm still getting over being sick. This was a function of the fact that... Okay, so you had this problem of nobility and inheritance. Let's say you're a noble landowner with a large estate, and you have 3 sons. Well, there becomes a problem, because if you divide your estate 3 ways, you've diminished your family's standing. Suddenly, your rival families who have kept their estates intact are 3 times your size. And if you repeat that over just a few generations, suddenly you've gone from a powerful noble family with large landholding to a dozen smallholders with very little political power or organization. So to avoid that problem, what they would do is say, okay, to my firstborn son, this was the 16, I mean, this was really practiced throughout the Middle Ages, but we'll say, 1600s, always a son, blatant misogyny. Welcome to the past. Firstborn son gets the land, inherits the entirety of the estate to ensure it remains intact and at its full potency. But you still have 2 other sons that are still of noble heritage, just not the firstborn son. What do? Well, there became, over time, certain roles that these other sons would be seen as befitting a person of their status. And one of them was military officership. And like modern military officership, that, is much more open than the officership of this era. Obviously, there's no requirement to be born at a certain level of wealth or attainment. However, modern officership expects you to have a certain level of education. You're expected to have a college education, or completed a bachelor's degree in something. And this presumes so that the officer is able to read, write, perform the basic arithmetic, and all the other things that are sort of necessary in administering, running, and leading a combat unit. To ensure that you had the same, because there was no general college you could draw your officer corps from, you instead would have to draw them from the only sources that you can find educated men. Again, always men. And that was the landed nobility. They would be able to provide their young men an education. They would emerge able to read, write, oftentimes Greek and Latin. They would have studied the classics. They would have been as equipped as you were probably going to find to lead the complex bureaucratic and mathematical functions of an army. And so that's why they would draw from those people and they would get them appointed. So yes, it's absolutely correct that these people would have oftentimes a little military background, as every junior officer does, and that they would be drawn primarily on the basis of their father's wealth. But it's not necessarily as radically different from our current system. And there were other systems, and our system has plenty of flaws. And actually, subsequent reformed systems also had a bunch of flaws. Most famously, there was literally, you don't get promoted until the person above you dies. That was from like basically the late 1700s to like the 1890s. That was the policy, was that if the captain above you was 65, until that dude bit it or got promoted, you were going to remain as an ensign.
You can smell them from here. Take in the air. I smell piss. That might be me, though. To the rocks, to the left. Form on my right, quickly. Over here, on my right. Take aim towards the enemy. About their feet. Fire! Come on, boys. Do me proud. Cut them down. Be a proud Britishman. Kill. Oh, dear.
So you notice what's happening here is that there's a problem. They fired their rounds. Now all of them are reloading, meaning that if the enemy had just gotten behind cover, they could now pop up and basically pick these forces off at will. How do you solve this problem? How do you ensure a continuous volume of fire? Well, through something called continuous volleys. And this would be the system. This is why you had ranks and files, why they formed the square, because the lead rank would fire their weapons, take a knee, and begin the reloading process. The second rank would provide covering fire. They would engage the enemy. They would fire, right? Pop, 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 pop. That second rank would fire. They would take a knee and begin to reload. And the third rank would step up and fire. And by the time the third rank had completed their firing sequence, their volleys, the first rank would be ready to fire again. And it meant that there was a rolling I think it was even called rolling fire, rolling volleys. So it would be a constant, you would functionally have turned your formation of, 30 men into a machine gun operating together at a continuous fire, a continuous rate of fire. And it meant that exactly what they're seeing here would never have occurred because there would always be fire going down range, suppressing the enemy.
Bugger this, we're going to reform the other line. We've lost too many of our boys. With me, let's carry on going left.
He got us killed! He got us killed!
This is the last stand, gentlemen. All that we stand for. The British Empire and all our colonies. King George, His Brilliant Majesty, who we all can agree is quite balmy. Take aim! Fire!
How many musicians do we have? For Christ's sake, bring guns, will you?
We British are good at three things. Fighting, paying taxes, and kicking the shit out of the French.
He's in his element here. He's enjoying this.
We do not move, we do not falter, we do not carry from our God-given task.
Fuck that, I'm faltering. Fuck you.
Arms, targets to the front. I shall take over now, Standard Bearer, thank you very much.
Yeah, it's not clear on why they're just firing volleys at things, but okay.
Freezer! Right! Excuse me, sir. I think we'll find that this is my section. Good question.
So I think a well-trained unit at this time would be able to just get a command like rolling volleys fire, and that they would know to, fire, kneel, reload, next rank, fire, kneel, they would automatically be able to until they were given a command such as ceasefire, port arms, column right march, right? And then they would maneuver. So again, the principles of warfare remain constant: fire and maneuver, seizing an objective, applying combat power to the enemy. But its implementation is totally different. This is why we talk about strategies, which are universal, and tactics, techniques, and procedures, which are time and place specific.
Bugger off! I have been usurped, I say. I think my net connection died.
It's not just you, dude.
It's the server.
Ah, the laggy fields of Waterloo.
On the colours, boys, to battle to glory and to death. We shall prevail.
You sound doubtful about that prevailing part.
What are you doing, Mr. Womble? You should be wearing a proper kilt.
I'm not from Scotland. I'm from a place where people dress properly.
What? Oh, that's America right there.
He's going in the loo. Really? Really, dude? Really? Right now? You have to go right now?
I'm real tired of catching musket balls from 80 meters away. It's a real pain in my ass.
Oh, it's literally the Italians.
It's pronounced arse, not ass.
So Italy was not a unified country until like 1880. So there was no Italian stereotypes. You would just be the Viennese or the Napoli? No, not Nepalese. From Naples. Neapolitan. I got it.
Yes.
Like the ice cream.
Arse with an R on it. Arse. Yes, you've got it, man, you've got it.
Come on, get over here and kiss my ass,
Yeah.
you rich bitch. Come here, you rich bitch, and kiss
See, we'll civilize you colonists yet. Oh, Christ!
Is this the old beatdown? Yeah, that's the other thing, man. Some of these classic armies, you hear the stories about how they operated, and it was brutal, man. One of the controversies that started the War of 1812 was what was called impressment, and the British Navy, the Royal Navy, was so short on people and so scummy and dirtbaggy that, no kidding, they would do. Well, they would find a merchant ship, an American colonial merchant ship, and they had merchant sailors, and they would just basically demand that the ship like pull over. Basically, they would board the ship. They would say, you all know how to sail, and you all speak English. Get on my ship. You are now sailors in the British Royal Navy." And of course, you can imagine these American colonists were like, "We're not even citizens of your country. We fought a whole war over this. You can't tell us what to do." But in the moment, the British had the guns and these sailors didn't. So off they would go in chains and shackles to, serve in the British Royal Navy, which is even in modern days just punishment from God. So the point is that beating the crap out of each other is probably just par for the course.
Yeah, that sums up the Holdfast community.
Hey, listen, you gotta leave me alone here. Come on, let's debate or something. Come on.
He's the last man remaining.
Come on, I'll switch sides. I'll turn a turncoat. Come on. Praise Napoleon, eh? Oh, big dick. Oh. Yeah, come on, get the hell out of here. I need you to pretend you don't see me. Come on, leave me the hell alone. Get away from me. Stop looking at me. Stop looking at me. Leave me alone. You come anywhere closer, I'm gonna take out this pistol and I'm gonna shove it up your asshole, okay? I promise. Don't make me do it. Let's do it like gentlemen. Come on, let's have a sword fight. Come on. Come on.
Brilliant.
Come on, I'll show you how it's done. Come on.
He's kicking up.
He's just massacring people with a flag.
Dig me with me!
They're running away from the
Behind
bomb.
the lines! You just stand there.
Oh god, they're Russian, I think. The British and the Japanese?
Oh.
Dig me! Get me a surgeon who can fix that! Get me
At least they got a kill.
The surgeon's hit! Where's he gone? Where'd he go? He must be okay.
Come on, gentlemen, get moving on the double time. Move your little chicken legs. Come on, I'll show you a thing or two about cardio. Get my fitness package, $10.99 a month.
Gotta sell your course. Speaking of which, guys, check in the description. I've taken everything I've learned in the past 2 years of YouTube, right? Because that was when I stopped screwing just stopped making terrible content and started making decent content, and distilled it into one giant 5-hour-long masterclass. Don't worry, it's divided into little chapters, but it's like 90% off with the promo code in the description. Definitely want to check it out, right? And I don't know, get your YouTube journey started today.
He's selling his fitness program.
Come on, put him up.
Hello.
Stupid bastards, you can't do anything to me because I'm the king. You can't kill the king.
Hello.
So, want to point out that, again, when these armies would finally hit each other, which sometimes did happen, right? They would march at each other, pummeling each other with these musket rounds, but eventually they would come into close contact, and then you would end up in a close quarters fight. But remember, it took you like between 1 and 3 minutes to reload, which is not always feasible when you were sometimes just a few yards from your enemy. That's why they would become equipped with bayonets, and they would bayonet charge and stab at each other. The officers would often have swords, but oftentimes even just clubs and other improvised weapons would be common on the battlefield here.
Shut the fuck up.
I'm a fidget spinner.
Okay.
In the name of the king! Charge! No, I've changed my mind. I found God.
Sir, we've got to defeat the enemy, sir.
Digby has been hit. Digby, I'm sorry, I promised your wife that... You bastards! I'll get you home safely. I will take good care of her. Surgeon, is there nothing you can do for this officer? Please! What are you doing? You're not qualified, are you?
Yeah, the old school surgeons. What's funny is that in the UK, when you complete your doctor training, you're referred to as doctor. But if you complete your surgical residency and you are officially a surgeon, you are no longer officially a doctor. You are referred to as Mr. And that is because surgeons in the British tradition were, well, in the earliest eras, also barbers and dentists, I think. So they would not have an honorific like doctor. Instead, they would be regarded as Mr. So surgeons of the modern era, despite, actually practicing like medicine, would in fact adopt the moniker of Mr. They would lose the title of doctor.
Where did you get your...
It's the one
It's for the bayonet charge. So no one can now fire apart from officers with their pistols. It's now... I love that Kenneth has made a meme. I got, is that Kenneth again? I'm just gonna watch the British line. Oh, they're all turning to the right as well, look at them.
Present again, lads. Aim and are moving. And fire.
They're pretty disciplined.
Ninja warrior.
Get around and take it easy. Take it easy, everybody. We're the biggest penises in France. Napoleon loves you. You're going to come with me. We're going to kill the victims. We're going to take their women. And we're going to satisfy them. Vive
la France! Vive la France!
Yeah, okay. What you want to do is, again, as we talked about, you don't want to charge across too much open space, right? That 1 to 3 minute mark, if you can't cover the distance and the time it takes your enemy to reload, then you're going to get shot. Because you can't run and reload.
Sorry, Sarge! That's why, Sarge.
Press B if you're a real man.
So basically the British are all drill lines and organisation. The French, it's just men screaming. Can't help myself face. But even if I could, it'd be in French anyway, so I wouldn't understand it.
Oh my God, no, my friend, no. Why? Press the B button for glory. Vive la
France.
Alright, go with it.
Him. Come on, he just ran straight to our line. Are you being serious?
Only cowards crouch. The real penises aren't even able to crouch. The penis is away.
This is very elaborately thought out, to be honest.
French army never retreats. He only advances. Sometimes he advances in different directions, okay? Make a line with me, okay? Aim straight down, turn around, and go. Around you, Victor! To our fighters like we're not Witness me, Laurie!
Witness me. Did he just say witness me? Screw it. Fuck you! Fuck you!
British are victorious.
The United Kingdom are victorious. I appreciate that grammatical choice. Oh, we just went backwards.
Fuck you!
Wow, what a couple of schmucks. Wow.
Across the street. I'm walking right here. I'm walking here.
You have the going across one. I don't think
Why
so.
is everyone from Boston? British, French, everyone's from fucking Boston.
And fire!
I hit one, sir. Sir, I hit one.
Well done. Where did you aim, sir?
At the enemy, sir.
Aim direct. Well done, sir. Well done.
Oh, go
I don't even know what to tell you here. These guys are just being weird.
Ginny.
I mean, the thing is, what's so strange about this era is that it predates photography. So we have literally no, the earliest combat photographs are the Crimean War, I think in like the 1890s. And even those are like still photographs of battlefields, oftentimes, or like entrenched positions. There's not really any movement. So we really don't know what it was actually like to have these two armies charge and attack one another. It was just sort of knowing how it would play out was just sort of knowledge that was persistent over generations, the way that you would have enough older commanders, older troops that would know how battles were going to go, and then the younger troops would just follow suit, gain that knowledge, and then pass it on to the next generation. And it's kind of crazy because in a lot of ways that dates to warfare. You could trace that intellectual history all the way back to Alexander or the Roman times, right? Of fighters who exist in militaries passing their knowledge of combat operations down to the next generation.
You stab me. Listen up, buddy boy. I'm an avid. If you think you can stab me, I'm gonna make you.
That was brilliant.
Truly classic, gents. True classic Sovietwomble right there. I hope you guys learned something. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you want access to some exclusive content, including some stuff that's just a little too edgy for YouTube, you want to check out the Patreon. Thanks to our Lieutenant tier patrons. I'll catch you guys in the next one.